March 15, 1956, 10:23 p.m. The Cotton Club was filled with the city's most important people. There were celebrities, politicians, businessmen, and mobsters, all in the same room. The music was loud, the drinks were everywhere, and the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of money. Bumpy Johnson sat in his special corner booth, sipping a glass of Hennessy. His grey suit was perfectly pressed. His diamond cufflinks sparkled in the light. He looked like he owned the place. And in a way he did. That's when Vito Marcello walked in. Vito was a lieutenant in the Genovese family. He was 6'2" and 240 pounds of pure muscle, built in Italian prisons. He had a reputation, a scary one. For 15 years, Vito had been the family's enforcer. He was the guy they sent when talking didn't work. When they needed someone scared, when they needed someone hurt, Vito did the hurting. He saw Bumpy across the room. Vito walked straight toward him. The crowd moved out of his way. The music didn't stop, but something in the room changed. Vito reached Bumpy's table. Without saying a word, he grabbed Bumpy by the collar. His huge hand wrapped around Bumpy's neck. The room went completely silent. Everyone was watching, waiting. Would Bumpy fight back? Would his men step in? What would happen next? What happened in those next 10 seconds changed everything. It sent a message that echoed through the underworld for decades. A message that said something simple. Don't ever put your hands on Bumpy Johnson. What nobody knew that night, what the newspapers never reported, is exactly what Bumpy did to Vito in that moment. The truth was far worse than anyone could have imagined. That to understand what happened that night at the Cotton Club, you need to know who Bumpy Johnson was in 1956 and why an Italian enforcer thought he could walk into Harlem's most exclusive club and put his hands on him. By 1956, Bumpy Johnson had become something almost impossible in New York's criminal underworld. He was a black man in complete control of a major territory that shouldn't have been possible. The Italian mob ran everything. They controlled Brooklyn. They controlled Queens. They controlled the Bronx. They controlled most of Manhattan, but Harlem was different. Harlem was black, and while the Italian families tried to work there, they never really understood it. They didn't understand the culture. They didn't understand the community. They didn't understand what loyalty meant in Harlem, you see. The Italian mob ruled through fear and violence. They came into a neighborhood and took what they wanted. They didn't care about the people. They just cared about the money. Bumpy was different. He ruled through respect. When families in Harlem couldn't pay their rent, Bumpy paid it. When police bothered black-owned businesses, Bumpy made calls that made the harassment stop. When kids had no food, Bumpy made sure they ate. He didn't do these things for attention. He did them because he believed Harlem was special. It was home, and home should be protected. The mid-1950s were a dangerous time for Harlem. The neighborhood was full of potential. New jazz clubs were opening. New businesses were starting. New money was coming in. But that success also made Harlem a target. The Italian mob looked at Harlem's success and saw one thing: opportunity. They wanted to take over the numbers racket. They wanted to take over the numbers racket. They wanted to take over the nightclubs. They wanted to take over everything. That the problem was Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy had built an empire that the Italians couldn't easily break. He had partnerships with local business owners. He had connections with city officials. He had the loyalty of thousands of people in the neighborhood. More importantly, Bumpy had an intelligence network that knew everything happening in Harlem before it happened. The Italians had tried everything to get Bumpy out of the way. They tried violence. They sent soldiers into Harlem to scare him. Those soldiers ended up in hospitals. They tried money. They offered Bumpy millions to step aside. Bumpy refused. They tried politics. They got politicians to bother Bumpy. But Bumpy had better politicians on his side. By 1956, the 5 Italian families had made a decision. If they couldn't remove Bumpy the usual way, they would try intimidation. They would send a message. They would show Bumpy that disrespecting the Italian mob came with consequences. That's where Vito Marcello came in. Vito Marcello was the kind of man that nightmares are made of. He had scars across his face from knife fights. His left eye was always cloudy from a bullet wound. His hands looked like they had smashed concrete. In prison, he had killed 7 men in the streets. The number was higher. Nobody really knew. Vito didn't keep count. Killing was just what he did. It was his job. The Genovese family sent Vito to Harlem with clear instructions. Go to the Cotton Club where Bumpy does business. Make a show of force. Embarrass him in front of his own people. Show the underworld that Bumpy Johnson was just another black gangster who could be disrespected by a real Italian mobster. Show them that the Italian mob was still in charge. This wasn't the first time the Italians tried to show they were in control. 6 months earlier, they sent a group of 8 men to shake down one of Bumpy's numbers operations in East Harlem. Those 8 men never made it out of the neighborhood with the money. They barely made it out with their lives. One of them spent 3 months in the hospital with a shattered knee. He never walked the same way again. 3 months before that, a Genovese lieutenant tried to take over Bumpy's territory. He went to several of Bumpy's associates and tried to get them to work for him instead. Within a week, that lieutenant was found in an alley with 2 broken arms and a message carved into his chest. Not literally, but the message was clear. Yet still, the Italians kept trying, and still Bumpy kept winning. By March 1956, the Italian mob was getting desperate. They needed to do something bold, something that would shake Bumpy's control. They needed to prove that the Italian mob was still the top power in New York. That's exactly what Vito Marcello was supposed to do that night at the Cotton Club. He was supposed to grab Bumpy by the collar in front of everyone and remind him who was really in charge. It seemed like a simple plan. Show strength, embarrass the target, send a message, return home a hero. Nobody expected what actually happened. 2 weeks before the Cotton Club incident, the heads of the 5 Italian families met in a private dining room at a restaurant in Little Italy. Frank Costello sat at the head of the table, Carlo Gambino to his right, Vito Genovese to his left, Thomas Eiley across from them, and Vincent Gigante watching from the shadows. These 5 men controlled organized crime in New York City. Between them, they had thousands of soldiers, millions of dollars, and access to judges, cops, politicians, anyone they wanted. But there was one problem they couldn't seem to solve. Bumpy Johnson, Costello said, his voice flat and cold. We've been trying to deal with this man for 5 years, and he's still there. He's gotten worse, Gambino added. He's more powerful than ever. He's got protection now. Politicians, judges, even some cops are on his payroll. Vito Genovese leaned forward. We could kill him, end of story. We send 5 guys, they take him out. Problem solved. No. Costello said firmly. If we kill him, we make him a martyr. We make him a symbol. The whole black community in Harlem rises up against us. We don't want war. We want control. And we can't control Harlem if we're fighting a revolution. Tom Eiley spoke up. Then what? We just let him sit there and laugh at us? No, Gambino said slowly. We embarrass him. We show the underworld that Bumpy Johnson is not untouchable. We show them that the Italian mob is still in charge. Once his own people lose respect for him, the empire falls apart on its own. How? Vincent Gigante asked from the shadows. We send someone to the Cotton Club, Gambino continued. We send someone who will do something so bold that everyone in New York hears about it. Something that proves Bumpy is just another man who can be disrespected by an Italian. They used that word. Without hesitation. It was 1956. It was how they talked. It was how they thought. Who do we send? Costello asked. Vito Marcello. Genovese answered right away. He's our best. He's brutal. He's smart. He won't back down. They all nodded. Vito Marcello was the right choice. Vito had been tested in ways most men never were. He'd survived in Italian prisons. He'd killed for the family a dozen times. He'd never hesitated, never questioned an order. He just did it. 3 days later, Vito met with Genovese in a private office above a social club in the Bronx. Ganevese explained the plan. The Cotton Club, Friday night, March 15th. We know Bumpy will be there. He's always there on Friday nights. You walk in, you find him, and you grab him in front of everyone. You grab his collar. You make it clear that you can touch him anytime you want. You make it clear that his power is fake. What if his people step in? Vito asked. They won't, Genovese said. Bumpy won't let them. He's too proud. He thinks he can handle any situation alone. That's his weakness. His pride. What do I do after I grab him? You say these words exactly, Genovese said, pulling out a piece of paper. Bumpy Johnson. The 5 families own Harlem. You just rent. And your rent is due. Then you let him go and walk out. Simple, clean, effective. Vito nodded. And if he resists, then you hurt him. Genovese said coldly. You hurt him bad. You make an example. But we're betting he won't resist. We're betting his pride won't let him cry out. We're betting he'll take it. To keep his reputation, Vito left that meeting confident. He'd done harder things than this. He'd walked into rooms with 6 armed men and walked out with all 6 on the ground. He'd questioned people who thought they were tough until they learned what real pain was. This seemed easy. Walk in, grab a 55-year-old gangster, deliver a message, walk out. What could possibly go wrong? March 14th, 1956. The day before the Cotton Club incident, Bumpy was in his office above Small's Paradise Jazz Club when one of his informants came in. This Informant was a taxi driver named Marcus. Drove people all over the city. He heard conversations. He noticed patterns. He kept his eyes open. And Marcus had ears in every Italian social club in the city. Mr. Johnson, I heard something you should know, Marcus said, sitting down across from Bumpy's desk. Talk. Bumpy said, there's word on the street. Vito Marcello is planning something. Word is he's going to do something at the Cotton Club tomorrow night. Something public. Something meant to embarrass you. Bumpy set down his coffee cup slowly. How do you know this? I drove 3 Genovese guys last night. They were talking in the back seat like I wasn't. Their drivers are invisible to these guys. They talk freely around us. I heard the whole plan. Vito's supposed to grab you. Say that the family's own Harlem. Make a show in front of everyone. Bumpy was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, a cold smile, a dangerous smile. Marcus, what did I give you last month? $2,000, sir, for my daughter's tuition. And the month before, $500 for my wife's medical bills. And before that, $3,000 for my mother's house repair. I take care of my people, Bumpy said quietly, and my people take care of me. You've proven that today. Marcus, you're loyal. You look out for me. I won't forget that. Bumpy opened his safe and pulled out a stack of cash. He handed it to Marcus. $5,000 for your family, for being a real friend. After Marcus left, Bumpy sat alone in his office for 2 hours. He stared at nothing. He just thought, Vito Marcello, a real killer, a man who had nothing to lose, a man who truly believed in his own power. Most men in Bumpy's position would have done one of 2 things. They would have either killed Vito before he got the chance to make his move, or they would have had their men ready to step in when Vito grabbed him. Take him down right away, overwhelm him with numbers. But Bumpy Johnson wasn't most men. Bumpy understood something that most people missed. Real power wasn't about what you could do to your enemy. Real power was about what you could make your enemy do to himself. Vito was planning to embarrass Bumpy in public, but Bumpy had a better idea. He would let Vito try his plan, and then he would do something that would embarrass not just Vito, but the entire Italian mob. Bumpy made 3 phone calls. The first call was to a man named Harold. Harold ran a small gym in East Harlem. He trained fighters, he trained soldiers, he trained men, but more importantly, Harold had worked as a fighter in his younger days. He knew how to hurt people in ways that looked like accidents. Harold, I need you tomorrow night. Bumpy said. I need you at the Cotton Club. I need you to see something, and I need you to be ready to do something if I give the signal. Anything, Mr. Johnson. The second call was to a woman named Patricia. Patricia was a reporter for one of New York's black newspapers. She had connections. She could make stories spread fast. Patricia, I want you at the Cotton Club tomorrow night. I want you to bring your camera, and I want you to be ready to see something that's going to change New York. Mr. Johnson, what am I looking for? You'll know when you see it. Just be ready. The third call was to every important person in Harlem, the politicians, the business owners, the community leaders. The message was simple. Be at the Cotton Club tomorrow night. Something important is going to happen. That night, Bumpy didn't sleep. He didn't need to. His mind was sharp. He was thinking through every scenario. What if Vito was faster than expected? What if Vito brought backup? What if Vito had a gun? Bumpy realized he needed insurance. He needed something that would make what he was planning work perfectly. He called a friend named Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen wasn't a real doctor. He was a chemist. He made things for people who needed them. He made poisons. He made compounds that caused paralysis. He made things that left no trace. Dr. Chen, I need something that will make a man's hands stop working temporarily for about 24 hours. Stop working how? Dr. Chen asked. Severe pain, swelling, loss of grip strength, complete inability to use his hands for anything. That's very specific. Mr. Johnson, can you do it? Yes, but it's tricky to use. The target has to eat it, or it has to be on their skin and absorbed, or it has to enter through a wound. I'll make sure it enters through a wound. Bumpy said. By the next morning, Bumpy had everything he needed: a plan, backup, a chemical compound, and most importantly, total confidence that he understood exactly how Vito Marcello was going to react in any situation. The Cotton Club was New York's most exclusive venue. Served wealthy white people and connected mobsters. It had the best jazz bands, the most beautiful women, the most expensive champagne. On Friday nights, the club was packed. Tonight was no different. The main floor was a sea of expensive suits and elegant dresses. Waiters in white gloves moved through the crowd. With trays of drinks, the band played smooth jazz. The bartenders mixed cocktails with skill. Everything was perfect. Bumpy sat in his private booth on the second floor with 5 of Harlem's most important businessmen. They were talking about a new development project, new housing, new jobs, new opportunity. Bumpy was wearing his trademark gray suit, his fedora rested on the table beside him, a glass of Hennessy sat untouched in front of him. He was waiting. At 10:23 p.m., Vito Marcello walked through the front doors. He was wearing a black suit. His scar tissue was visible on his face. His cold eyes scanned the room. He saw Bumpy right away. Vito started walking toward the second floor. The crowd moved out of his way. Nobody wanted to be in the way of Vito Marcello. Other mobsters saw him and nodded with respect. Vito ignored them. He had a mission. He reached the second floor landing where Bumpy's booth was. The conversation at Bumpy's table stopped. Everyone knew what was about to happen. Everyone knew who Vito was. Everyone understood this was about power, about respect, about territory. Vito walked straight to Bumpy's booth. The men at the table started to stand up. Bumpy raised his hand slightly. Sit, Bumpy said quietly. Let's see what this man has to say. Vito reached down and grabbed Bumpy by the collar. His huge hand wrapped around Bumpy's neck. The hand was big, powerful, scarred from years of violence. Vito was strong, enough to crush a man's windpipe with one hand. He pulled Bumpy up from the seat. The entire club went silent. The band stopped playing. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. 300 people watched as an Italian enforcer grabbed a 55-year-old black man by the neck. Vito's eyes were ice cold. He opened his mouth to say the message, Bumpy Johnson, the 5 families, but he never finished that sentence because Bumpy, even while being grabbed by the collar, had already made his decision. Bumpy raised his right hand with a speed that shocked everyone in the room. His hand went straight for Vito's eyes. Bumpy's fingers were like daggers too. Fingers went straight into Vito's eyes, not just touching them, but pressing hard, digging in. Vito screamed, a sound of pure pain. His hand came off Bumpy's collar right away. As he brought both hands to his face, Bumpy stepped back. His movements were controlled. His expression was calm. But Bumpy wasn't done. As Vito stumbled backward, trying to protect his now hurt eyes, Bumpy moved forward. He grabbed Vito's right wrist, the same hand that had grabbed him by the collar. Bumpy twisted it with perfect skill. He found the pressure point on Vito's wrist, the spot that controlled all the nerves and blood vessels. Then he held that wrist directly over a candle burning on a nearby table. The flame touched Vito's skin. Vito screamed again, but before he could pull away, Bumpy put the chemical paste that Dr. Chen had made right into the burn wound. The chemicals soaked into Vito's bloodstream through the wound. Within seconds, Vito's hand started to swell. Within a minute, his whole hand was purple. The nerves were screaming. The pain was unbearable. Bumpy let go of Vito's hand and stepped back. He straightened his suit jacket. He fixed his collar. He looked at Vito with complete calm. Now you listen to me, Bumpy said quietly. His voice carried through the silent club. You came into my space. You put your hands on me. You disrespected me in front of my people. That was a mistake. Vito was on his knees now, holding his right hand. His eyes were bleeding. His hand was ruined. The pain was impossible to describe. That hand is going to hurt for days, Bumpy continued. You're going to lose feeling in those fingers. You might recover. You might not. But you will never forget what it feels like to disrespect Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy looked at the rest of the club. Everyone was staring, frozen. Now, let me tell you what you're going to tell your bosses, Bumpy said. You're going to tell them that Bumpy Johnson doesn't fight fair. You're going to tell them that Bumpy Johnson is smarter than any of them. You're going to tell them that Bumpy Johnson is 3 moves ahead. And you're going to tell them that if they ever send another man to lay hands on me, I will break every bone in his body and leave him for the medical examiner. Harold stepped forward from the crowd where he'd been waiting. He picked Vito up by his good arm and carried him to the front door. He threw him out onto the street like garbage. The band started playing again. Conversations started up again, but everyone knew that something huge had just happened. Patricia, the newspaper reporter, had captured everything on film. She had pictures of Vito's face twisted in pain. She had images of the burned, swollen hand. She had proof of everything. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. The black newspapers ran headlines. Italian mobster humiliated at Cotton Club. The underground grapevine in the mob world spread the story even faster. By noon, every crime boss in New York knew what had happened. By evening, every mob boss in every major city knew. Vito Marcello spent 3 days in the hospital. His eyes got better after a week. His right hand took 6 months to heal. When it did heal, the nerve damage was permanent. Vito could no longer grip things tightly. He couldn't hold a gun with accuracy. His career as an enforcer was basically over. He was 38 years old and his life as a violent criminal had just ended. He was forced to take a desk job counting money, managing books, not the kind of work a man like Vito wanted to do. For the rest of his life, Vito carried the memory of that night, and every time his right hand hurt, which was often, he remembered Bumpy Johnson. The heads of the 5 families held an emergency meeting the next day. They were furious, not at Bumpy, at Vito for failing, but more importantly, they understood what had just happened. They understood that Bumpy Johnson was not a man to mess with. "We sent our best," Carlo Gambino said, and he broke him, not with guns, not with an army, with his brain, with his strategy. Frank Costello leaned back in his chair. "We leave Harlem alone. We tried. We failed. We tried again. We failed. We're not going to waste any more soldiers on this man. Harlem is Bumpy's. We accept it." It was the first time the Italian mob had ever officially admitted that they couldn't control a major New York territory, that it was a huge change in the power structure of organized crime. The story of the Cotton Club incident became the foundation of Bumpy Johnson's legend. People told it for decades. Parents told their kids. Kids told their grandkids. It wasn't just a story about a fight. It was a story about strategy. It was a story about intelligence beating brute force. It was a story about a black man standing up to the Italian mob and winning. From that day forward, nobody in the underworld ever challenged Bumpy Johnson again. Not because they were afraid of him, but because they respected him. They understood that Bumpy was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Bumpy Johnson lived another 12 years after the Cotton Club incident. He died in 1968, not in a violent fight, but in his sleep. By then, he had become a legend, not just in Harlem, but throughout the whole country. Here's what Bumpy proved that night that most people completely miss. Power doesn't come from your muscles. Power doesn't come from how many guns you have. Power doesn't come from how loud you can yell or how violent you can be. Real power comes from understanding people. Real power comes from staying calm when everyone else is panicking. Real power comes from knowing exactly what your enemy will do before they do it. Real power comes from playing the game 3 moves ahead while your enemy is still trying to figure out what the game is. Vito Marcello walked into that club thinking he was the dangerous one. He walked in with 15 years of street experience. He walked in with a reputation for being unstoppable. He walked in confident that he could take down a 55-year-old man, and he left broken. Not because Bumpy was physically stronger, but because Bumpy was smarter. This is what the underworld learned that night. The most powerful weapon isn't a gun, it's your mind. The most dangerous man isn't the one with the biggest fists, it's the one who thinks 10 moves ahead. The one who understands psychology. The one who turns his enemy's strengths into his enemy's weaknesses. Bumpy Johnson understood that violence was the tool of men without options. Bumpy always had options, and that's what made him untouchable.